All right. Happy Thursday. How's it going, guys?
Thursday. It's going
It's going
good.
great. How are you doing?
Sweet. Doing good, man. Doing real good. Doing good now. I'm excited for this. So, welcome everybody to another Evolve Lab Live. This is a very special Evolve Lab Live as this is round 2 of Helix, and it's more special because we actually are at a critical milestone where we have just launched Helix on the website. It's available to download, available to purchase. It's been a long time coming. There's been a lot of energy put into the tool. A very, very big special shout out to Mark and Chris, Daniel, Ben, everyone that's contributed to the Helix tool, the development of it. We really appreciate everyone that's contributed to it. For this, we're going to be going through a lot of the cool new features that we've been working on. Ben's going to be really facilitating here. Jim is going to be keeping an eye on the chat there. So if you guys have questions and comments, feel free to throw them in the chat there. Jim's going to be trying to get to those. Thanks, Jim, for doing that. Mark's going to be looking pretty. That's what Mark's doing here. No, I'm just kidding. Mark's going to be also chiming in here. Mark, feel free to contribute to the conversation. Mark's been very pinnacle to the architecture of the tool, how we've created it. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Mark. So, Mark, we really appreciate you and all the energy you've done on Helix, man. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome, Bill. I agree with everything you just said about it.
I love it. Very cool. Sweet. Cool. So we're going to jump into it as we're getting into things, and we got a lot to cover. So we're going to let Ben kind of share his screen and show what he's doing. But as always, what we want to do is have a lot of conversation in the chat. So if you guys can, go ahead and throw in the chat where you guys are listening in from or watching from. We'd love to know more about you guys, maybe which city you guys are calling in from. As well as if you're in the architecture industry or MEP industry, we want to know some of that, as well as if you guys are currently what you guys are using for design authoring tools. So it'd be great to know, are you guys using Format? Are you guys using Sketchup? Are you using Rhino? Are you using Revit? What design tools are you guys currently using? And we want to know those things. So, and just keep a lot of, communication going to us here in the chat. We want to have a nice conversation. So, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ben. Ben, I'm going to turn on your screen. So you are sharing screen, sir. Cool. Yep. And the floor is yours.
All right, cool. Yeah. So thanks everyone for joining us today. Like Bill said, so I'll dive right into it, and essentially I'll go over some of the newer features that we haven't covered in our last conversation. So I'll just kind of dive into this one model here, where it's kind of a model in SketchUp, and it's got just street view photo match painted on the buildings, and I just made all the different buildings mesh based. So in Revit they translate as just kind of like import symbols. So I'll probably add this piece too here. So if I go into the mapper, I'll just make it mesh here and send that through as well, and that should come in on the Revit side as just like a non-editable kind of mesh element. So I'll turn on the sync here, and we should see that kind of come in here in a second. I think, yeah, let's see. Yeah, it seems like this one's got it. Let me turn it on and off. Try that again. Yeah, so it seems like this element's giving me a little bit of a issue here. But basically, what I wanted to do with this one is I want to go through this building here and kind of BIMify it. Like, what do you have to do to essentially get it so that you could actually have real walls and things like that? So what I'll do is I'll take it out of the mapping, and so if I synchronize that, you'll see how this is just going to disappear essentially on the other side. If I turn that on. So it seems like my instance here is not behaving.
Control delete.
Yeah, I'll probably just delete it, I guess. Let's see if I just bring it in all the way. Just redo it. Let's see.
Okay. Yeah, it's not a real live demo unless you have issues during the demonstration. So
I was just running through this.
I was going to say, yeah, it worked like 10 minutes ago, right? And then you go live, and it's like, yep.
So I'll probably just run it from scratch here. I run that. And then I'm just going to go through all of them and just clear up my mapping, actually. And I'll just handle it by object. So Okay. Okay, so that seems to success.
Success.
Yeah.
So
I'll
what did you do? Did you just unmap it and remap it and then it came back?
yeah, it seems like there's an issue with for some reason with this model. Like it's just some kind of mapping I think got messed up. So I just had to undo it. I actually started a new model from scratch, so I'll just kind of remap everything this way.
Sweet.
So yeah, so basically I'll just map these ones as the DXF, so we could kind of just see them as a background, and then I'm going to start to kind of binify that one object there. So there you go. So these are coming in.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Now that was pretty freaking cool.
Yep. And then I'll map also kind of this other object up above. So we'll do that. And then that should come in here. And again, these are kind of just like a quick mesh-based workflow. And then, like I said, we're going to kind of convert this into kind of that more BIM element. So I'll change this view so that it's perspective.
And hang on, slow down here. So quick question. Now
Yeah.
you just, I have a question about this. I'm saying that. So are you basically taking like a site context from SketchUp and then you're bringing this into the Revit environment for context for your building design?
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Wow.
So this is exactly one-to-one what you see inside here. And then essentially I want to kind of move forwards and get it so that it's like editable within Revit.
That's freaking cool. Okay, cool. And then, so what are these objects? What's the context in here? Then is this a DXF, a direct shape?
Yeah. So these are right now a import symbol, a DXF
Okay.
import symbol, and
Okay.
we are actually working on a feature where these are going to be wrapped in a family. They're not wrapped in a family, but yeah. So if you look at this, it says over here import symbol, and then it has like the ID, and it has this option to explode it because they're directly imported right into the project environment.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So could you? Sorry. So then, could you?
Yeah.
What would be the workflow? Like, would you have a Google Earth like map? Could you take something like that, the building typology in there, map them
Right.
as a direct shape, and bring those in?
Exactly. So I think I might even actually have that. Let's see if I have the. I'm going to turn on everything here and see what happens. No, I think I just have some CAD files. But yeah, I do have like photo matched things. So if I add like, you can see the Google Street View. So let me actually turn that on. I do want to save this scene so I don't lose my kind of layer states here. But yeah, so if I go to some of these views here, let's see. There you go. Like you can see, like it's just a photo match of the actual site, and this is like Google Street View.
Oh, cool.
So yeah,
very cool. Because I mean, that's probably a pretty common practice, right? For I've seen in architecture firms is where you take that site context from Google Earth, you bring it in, and now you're bringing that data into Revit as mass objects. That's a pretty sweet workflow.
Yeah. So if you know the scale in SketchUp of like the floor plan or like the site part, you could kind of derive all the heights and everything. So at a low resolution, it's not like super high within a few inches of accuracy. So yeah, it's really cool.
It's awesome.
Okay, so what
Hey,
I'll do
Ben,
is
sorry, really quick. We had a question, DLPC architects. If you explode it, what does it turn into? And can you edit the symbol file?
Yeah, if you do explode it, I can show that. So what will happen is, see, it just creates these lines basically. So these are model lines in Revit, essentially.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So I'll come back in here. I'll unmap this object here, and I'm gonna start to. What I'll do is I'll just set these exterior walls on a layer so that they can become walls inside of Revit. So I've already pre-made these layers to keep things simple. So I'm just gonna go to Helix walls here, and one thing I want to demonstrate here is that before this feature, we would have to essentially send all my data from Revit, like my family types, so they could be selectable drop-down values. But now we have these starter families that actually ship with Helix, so that you could just, without even having to kind of send the data from Revit, go ahead and kind of start to already directly map things. So if I select this layer here and I put it as I select walls, you have this kind of Helix wall, and that's the only drop down because we haven't kind of exported anything from the Revit side. And you do get this little warning here where it says no Revit family types loaded, sync family types from Revit to load more. So, if you want to see all the other types that you would have in Revit, you would kind of press that button. So, but for now, I'm going to map them with like the starter families to showcase that. So if I send that to Revit, you'll see how what would happen is that import symbol will disappear, and now it's being replaced with like actual like Revit elements. So these are actual, a wall with a profile that you can edit and trim and all that. So
Wow.
yeah.
Can I
That's awesome.
can I comment on this real quick, Ben?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, so like this is pretty wild. This is, a big part of Helix here is, what Ben is kind of showcasing, and just like the kind of the stage one there, bringing everything from Google Earth, bringing it into Revit as something, right? That like, and in this case, this sort of DXF import symbol type workflow. Um, you can start to see right away like what the context of what your Revit model's sitting in. But maybe it's not so helpful after a certain amount of time. Maybe because really what we want as we start to move down our design process is to be able to be parametric with our elements. And so, this is pretty astounding to me. It's a huge sort of value of Helix is, now Ben has actually said, okay, I got the context, but I want this bottom building to really be parametric, and because I'm going to need it to be my particular wall types, everything that my firm actually needs out of a sort of construction document ready model. And so I just wanted to comment on that real quick as you kind of pivot into this next stage of upgrading the model to really be a BIM model out of the SketchUp model versus just context as it was before.
Yeah, right on, Mark. So yeah, that's like, again, it takes a bit more work and you have the mapping, but you could recycle those mappings. And we'll get to that next when we go to the next model where you can export, if you have your layer system consistent, you have your standards set up, even this mapping portion to kind of classify your mesh objects inside of SketchUp as BIM objects as they translate, it's just going to lend itself to kind of have less friction there and automate that in a much quicker way. So I just made another layer here for Helix floor, so I'll put this one on that layer there. And then same thing, if I click that layer, I'll just kind of make it a floor, and I'll just make it a Helix floor, kind of like whatever comes in here. So as soon as I map that, you can see how that will kind of translate here. So if there you go. On the Revit side. And then if I wanted to get all of my actual types from Revit, you could export them, your types. And then if I do that on the SketchUp side, I could see all those types. So I could come back here, and let's say if I wanted to change this from something like, let's say a concrete slab or something else, for example, I could do that, and that would essentially kind of update, that element so that actually changes to that. So if I use generic, if I choose like a different type, that could update to, whatever type I'm choosing from that dropdown, because now I have them from on the Revit side. So
That's awesome. Oh, sorry. I was going to say, and then
yeah,
you can, right now, I think you're showing too, Ben, like that's live syncing, right? So you're swapping out types with Helix, and in real time, you're getting a new Revit system family popping up over on the Revit side, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So freaking cool.
So yeah, so to go further with starter families, what we've done is we've kind of created starter windows and doors. So if I wanted to, again, I'm just going to do this kind of in a way that's, actually I'll do it inside of the actual component. I'm just going to sketch these out real quick, just to demonstrate that. So again, I'm kind of eyeballing this, but obviously, you could use pretty, closer dimensions. So I'll say window 1. Let's say that. Yep, that's fine. And then I'm gonna, right now we do have to extrude this so that it kind of has that depth there. And if I place this on a window layer and map that layer, so I click here, and then I do that, and it's a Helix window. I do have to make sure that the center of this is actually placed in the middle of the component, and we do have a warning for that actually. Maybe I should actually run it to demonstrate that first. So if I do send this to Revit, essentially, when it comes into Revit, it uses that insertion point as the center. So you can see it kind of came off to the side there. So as soon as I update that, so if I place this, I'll just hide this for a second, place in the middle here, then I'm just going to move it 1 inch. So change, you'll see that will actually come in the right spot as you've kind of drawn it. And what's cool about this is because it's layer based, you don't have to kind of map every single object. I could just go in here and, kind of it's over here, stretch it out. Maybe these actually do the same thing. Maybe I copy these over. Like that. Check that as well. What happens when we do this? And again, these are just like very low res components. And yeah, so I'll just hit send. And then I do have some warnings, so we can look at those warnings and showcase that. But yeah, there you go. They come in right there.
Whoa.
That's
That
awesome.
is-
And it sets the width and the height of that window, which is really cool. So if you go to this wall, and this is a BIM wall, obviously, if I a native wall, if I change it to something else, the window will change to that and kind of respect that essentially. So
How does it deal with the width and height parameters of those windows, Ben? Is it creating new types, or does it matter what type of window it is, I suppose, that you're mapping?
yeah, good question. So they're instance based right now. So we have one type, and then we just augment that instance. And I think we have increments of like within a 1/4 inch, so that we don't have so many instances. So we do kind of have that. But I don't know, Mark, if yeah, correct me if I'm wrong there.
No, yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Cool. So yeah, so if I go to a plan version of this, these windows are editable, so I could change them. If I have the accurate information, if I want to type in the right width, it's actually 6-foot window, then it'll adjust to 6 feet. Because it's I have that editability here in Revit.
That's so
and then
cool.
yeah, I'll probably add one more for the door. So I'll just make actually this one that I'll use the same component because we can. And I'll just put it under doors, and then I'll map that as a door, and then I'll stretch it down. So that should also come through as a door. I think the mapping is right. Let's see. So, oh, I see. I actually mapped I should map the layer, not the component itself. So do door. Helix door. There you go. Cool. So let me go back here.
Oh yeah, and I think you might be I think that layer should be window.
Oh, right.
Yeah, and then you're just a little mixed on the mappings. That's all.
Yeah, that's what I did. No, this should be a window. And then I should make this one a door here. And then, yeah, these are windows. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And then this
Mark's
one
here for all the QA/QC. Thanks for that, Mark.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah.
I
So
was
let's see.
well,
Now
we
everything's
get
a
us on a
door
course.
on my
Yeah.
model there. So we'll see what happens.
Mark's always fixing my mistakes. He's always pointing out all my errors and flaws. So thanks.
Yeah.
So we had the question. I think you already pretty much answered it, but if you scale the object, the frame of the window stays intact because it's all based on the type of window, right? So it's
Right.
however that family is built.
Right. So
Okay.
the family is actually right. You're exactly right. So it will stay the same size because it's a Revit family.
Gotcha.
So it's really just looking at the bounding box of that, and kind of, I think right now it's setting it as the actual inner width. So we don't account for if you built your family, it's the leaf of the door basically, not the additional frame. But we do have ideas about we could add additional kind of exceptions and parameters that kind of give you an input, so you could map those in a more specific way. And that's what we're looking for, user feedback, where we want to know how important that is. Is that something that would be very used, or this kind of rough geometry is good enough, and then because anyways I replace it with a different family or something like that. So
Speaking of which, so Ben said we're looking for that feedback. If you guys have feedback, even now, we want that feedback.
Yeah.
Do you guys see value in what we're showing here? We also have the ability to do this type-based. So if anybody has any heartburn over instance parameters for windows and doors, you can do it type-based. But this new workflow is pretty freaking cool because you're able to, on an instance by instance basis, put this over here, but it's still a Revit window. It's still a Revit door. So it's still schedulable. It's still parametric, which, nothing really exists like that from a SketchUp to Revit workflow. To convert this from the SketchUp massing model to intelligent, building information model, it's fully schedulable, fully parametric.
Great. So I'll do another cool trick here. Let's see. I'll move this back. Let's see. I'll probably copy it. I'll just copy it this way, and I'll make a separate kind of curtain-like object. So let me actually go inside here. I'll delete these pieces. I think I actually already have it. So basically, I just copy this back a bit, I'm going to map this. It's already put on placed on the layer for curtain walls. So I'm going to map that layer to actual curtain walls to showcase that as well. So there you go. And I'll use the storefront. And I do want to change something on the storefront side though here. And my other model had this, but we kind of had to kind of reset that. So back in here. And then if I go to my storefronts, I'll just send it to Revit for a second. So instead of using kind of that door and window, I'm essentially mapping that face to a storefront, and then you can see that this is a storefront element. So if I go to this storefront though, I do want to add some of these things in here. So you can see like the mullions. So I'm just going to use the same one for all of them just for simplicity. Actually, I could just copy and paste these. So if we do that, then, if you turn that on, you can kind of see those mullions come through. And what's really cool is that, so if I go into this mode, like if I were to kind of change this object, as I'm moving that, the storefront is going to add its additional, per the type, its additional mullions and things like that, and it kind of will react to that geometry. I think I actually extended it too long. Let me see. So I should note, we do now also have a status report. So if you have any issues with your geometry coming in, you can actually check that out. So I could see kind of what's going on. And I can see that curtain wall, I have an issue here. So it seems like I couldn't find the wall, the host of the wall. So I'm just going to modify it slightly to get that a bit more. So it doesn't overlap that window. I think that was the problem with it. It probably overlapped that window. So I couldn't make it. Maybe we make it larger too. Yeah. So what's really cool about Helix though is that you kind of do have this ability to have this feedback. So as you're changing things around, you kind of see it come through. So that's also very useful to be able to kind of like only change the objects that were, need to be changed, not everything else. Okay. So I'll probably like leave it where it was for this one because we have other models that we want to go through. But yeah, essentially like this is just kind of showing that all the starter families and how you kind of bring those over and how it auto detects some of this stuff. So if you want to kind of quickly rough in something that's, from SketchUp without kind of pairing everything up with like types, it would, you could do that this way. So cool. I'm going to move to the next model unless there's any other questions on this one from the chats or anything.
I think some people are just asking about like kind of the difference between this workflow and a Format workflow. Maybe you can speak to that a bit, Ben. I know there's an integration with Format to Revit, and then the SketchUp to Revit workflow. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. So with Format, basically, and SketchUp actually, you could link them both in natively, like native Revit. The support for Format is increased. Like we could do a lot more things, like the way you launch it and kind of live linking things. You could import things very easily into families and kind of have that workflow. And also materials are shared pretty nicely with Format, which is really cool. However, neither Format nor SketchUp handles the ability to actually create kind of these native Revit elements. So they're similar to kind of like my context buildings. Now, again, with Format, it's a bit better. It's better than just kind of these DXF imports, but it's similar in terms of functionality and usability for manipulation. And then also on this side, like the textures for Helix is something like, again, we're looking for feedback. Like if that's very important, like we can also bring that in so we can kind of have that parity there. But yeah, there's still kind of this need for the ability to actually convert that geometry into something that is native, because native geometry is very usable, and it's as if you made it in Revit to begin with. So
thanks, Ben.
Cool. So I'll close this one up for now, and then I will go to the next one here. Let's see. I'll close the report window. And then what I want to do actually is, yeah, so here we go. So people have asked me in the past, like, is that my car? Because I always like to demo a car in these demos. And yeah, this one actually is my car. So I do have a silver Prius. So there it is. And what I want to point out on this one is we did upgrade the DXF mesh workflow. So right now, before this update, we didn't have the ability to kind of show the hidden lines. So if you had like or the non-hidden lines, so if you would only see the kind of boundaries of things. So if you had something that was like, let's say like a triangle, and I won't demo this live because it takes a bit. If you had like a line that wasn't kind of hidden like that, that wouldn't come in. But now if I were to hit sync, that line would kind of pop into there and you would see it. So, but I'll probably delete this one for now because of the other workflows I want to show here. But just to kind of showcase where how we've kind of like upgraded that feature, and now it's here. So yeah, you could cut these. You could see kind of all of that good stuff inside. So all right, let me take off this section box, and I'm just going to delete it here and here. And for this model, it's already mapped. So I am using actually those starter families for the windows. And essentially, these are just components basically that were mapped to that layer. And then obviously in Revit, because the starter families are pretty basic, they're just kind of like, they don't have like the buttons and things like that. But what's really cool about this is if you start to kind of cut a section here, so I could show that through the model, sure. And I'll move this kind of down. Let's see, from here perhaps. Yeah, that's probably a good spot. You can see that this is kind of like one of those thin models that doesn't have like the thickness. So it's primarily used for kind of exterior renderings without kind of any detail in the interior, because it's kind of pretty quick to model this way for those purposes. If I go to Revit and I go to a floor plan, those are now converted into actual thickened walls with all the kind of elements that you would need. So the doors coming in, the some of the stuff I did use a DXF workflow. That is a pretty decent fallback method for if we're not supporting it BIM-wise, you could get it you can still get it as contextual geometry. So I did that for all the railing and the stair basically, where it's actually like that non-editable element. But obviously, we do have things on our backlog that can start to address some of these things of how to kind of parametrically transfer these over. So yeah, I could also demonstrate that, like if you look at it this way, this section box. Yeah. So the other thing I want to show on this one is the topography, which we didn't have a chance last time to talk about. So if I zoom out over here, I do have some examples on my Sketchup side. So we support kind of different things. So I'll just kind of start with this first one, where it's like this kind of stepped kind of aesthetic, and some people do actually do this in a schematic way. And you could transfer this over, obviously, in the two ways. You could do it with native topography, so I'll show how that works. So if I spool up Helix here, it looks like I have to reset that. Okay. So we do have actually user sign-ins now, so which is really cool because we could actually get like the licensing is up now. So what I'll do is I'll actually just import my mapping because you could actually export your mapping. So whatever you set up here, you could, so you can see this is from my previous session, basically, if that's the standard. And so you could actually set it and you could also load it. So I'll browse to my mapping file here for a second. This is also a new feature. So it's going to load up. And now everything is kind of mapped to my objects here. So I don't need the Prius anymore. But yeah, everything.
Okay, hang on real quick, Ben. Sorry to stop you here.
Yeah.
So why? What's the use case for these mapping layers? Because I think that's pretty cool. You mentioned it, but you mentioned it pretty quick there and subtly.
Yeah.
What would be the reason that someone would have these pre-baked mappings here?
Yeah, the idea with the mapping is, you can always set the mapping, but if you actually have different standards or you're mapping in a style that's more localized, like I'm doing it by material or by I have some unique layers, I didn't manage my model well. If those mappings are not that recyclable, then you still have the ability that if you did that mapping for that one project to save what you did for that and save it, in a file with that project or something like that. That way, if you go back to that project, you could just load that mapping file with all the relationships and all the work you've done to classify the objects in that SketchUp file, be it by layer, be it by texture and all that. So this is kind of a simple way to just be able to kind of not lose that information as you move from project to project, basically.
So could that also be a function of if there's a firm and they have like their SketchUp standards, layers, components, etc., the Revit standards, can they create almost like a Helix template or layer mapping system to be able to support an integration of a one-to-one workflow between both tools or not?
Yeah, I mean that could definitely be in that scenario too. Is as they embellish that template, because the mappings, you could have mappings of things that are not even present in your model, but as soon as you add them to your model, then they kind of take in or kick in. So yeah, you could have like a standards, and if you abide by that standards, then you don't have to do the classification anymore. So you can have like this central or this kind of like global file that you put somewhere, and then load that one up. And if you built your SketchUp model from the SketchUp template, then like you don't have to do a lot of the mapping because you're using the right layers. You're working in a way where it's standardized so that you don't have to reclassify things. So yeah, it's a really good point.
Sweet, that's awesome. Thanks, Ben.
Yeah. So, and to help with the mapping too, is I use this a lot where it's like color by layer. So you can see if you're using layer-based mapping, you just kind of automatically kind of visualize, what am I really mapping to what? So, yeah. I'm not going to use that for this one because this one's I'm going to kind of go one by one. So I'll disable that actually real quick. I do want to load this once to make sure that I'm in sync. So let me see if I can load that. That should do it. So just let me do a quick test here. So if I do come here and I change this, make sure it's kind of pairing up properly. And then if I send that to Revit, that should update that family. Nice. Okay, so we're good. So if I go to this object, again, it's just kind of a group.
Sorry, Ben. Sorry, keep interrupting. Yeah. I have a question or a comment on this. So this is cool. So you just updated that one window.
Right.
And we often get a question about Helix about like, okay, if say a firm's in design development, they've started dimensioning these other units, the doors are dimensioned, the windows are dimensioned, they have schedules for these things, they have parameters, etc. And you've changed this one element. What happens to all the other elements that are in that project file?
Yeah, good point. So let's just do some of that. I'm just gonna do some dimensions here. And then that way we could explore that. Oh, looks like I'm dimensioning the brick here. Yeah, I don't know. Let's go to the top of the roof. Looks okay. Here, we'll add more even. Oh, that's probably good enough for the demo. So if I come here, and I'll just make this one actually shorter, because I'm doing these vertical dimensions here. Sync that up, and then you'll see what happens with the stuff that wasn't modified and the stuff that was modified. So, oh, actually, you know what? I do need to reload that part. So the height right now, the CRUD doesn't refresh, so I'm going to just slightly also move it to the side. That's something that we know about, so it's a known issue. I only changed the height, but the insertion point didn't change, so that's why I didn't do anything. So if I load that again, actually I have to send it first. If I send it again, that should kind of pick up, and you can see how this will affect that portion. Yep, there you go. So basically, our updater, what it does is it actually just recreates it. It doesn't set parameters or translate or move. It just deletes and creates again if it changed. But the things that didn't change, this other stuff, actually that stays intact. So again, that's something that we want to hear more feedback if that's kind of like a very common thing where people are using Helix in their workflows pretty far along where they have dimensions and things like that, and they still want to control it with a SketchUp. Like then that could become a higher priority for us to kind of get to that feature first. But essentially, we do envision something like, well, you could change the parameters, especially for these families where you have instance parameters. You just reset those things and then translate. Just move the insertion point where it needs to move if you did do a translation operation there. So,
yeah, that's huge. Yeah, it'd be good to hear from you guys. I know, like when I used to work at an architecture firm, as many others, there's what I call this parallel modeling happens where you have a SketchUp team that's modeling and stuff and a Revit team modeling and Revit. This, correct me if I'm wrong, Ben, is supposed to kind of help with that handshake between the two programs. And so if you have someone that started to dimension in Revit, but say we're still, design's always, we're always designing, we're always updating. You're not losing the dimensions, you're not losing the tags or the data on the objects that are not being modified. So it'd be cool. We'd love to hear in the chat window if you guys have a similar workflow. Do you guys, and I'd like to know too, after SD, do you cut it off and then you're just on the Revit side? Do you guys go back and forth over the fence? Do you do parallel modeling? Do you never carry the information? It'd be good to know some of this. We want to have some feedback on that. So feel free to throw that in the chat window there.
Yeah. So I definitely do see a very good use case for that. And besides, dimensioning and tags, it's the element ID. A lot of things could be piggybacked on that. Like any other parameter that was set, like we don't want to lose that. If you've done an override on that, or like just being able to keep that element ID is pretty important if you are kind of using it in a workflow where you're a lot further into your design process. So, yeah. Okay, cool. So I'll probably I'll come back here and I'll map this one. I saw something in the chat about Enscape and the cart, and I'll get to that in a second, right after the typo, so I can demonstrate that. So I'll just select this object. It's just a group, so I'll just do it by group, not by layer here. I'll set to topography, and I'll send that over to Revit. And you'll see that as soon as I send that over, that comes in here. This one does look a bit funky. The first time I did actually didn't look funky, so I couldn't get that to replicate. But I'll show you the other version where it does look a bit more what you'd expect. So if you edit this topo surface, you actually see all the adaptive, not the adaptive, but the actual topo points, the survey points, which are essentially editable in Revit. So if you wanted to kind of move these up or change their, I just moved them that way, but I could change their elevation basically to, like, I don't know, let's see, 0. We'll zero these out. Now we have kind of a hole in your topo there. So, okay. So that's kind of one way where it's this step thing. You can still handle it. So essentially, this lets us kind of combine a bunch of different groups together, basically. And that's why, and maybe I'll go here. Well, I'll go to this one next. So this next one, I use the SketchUp feature where, and I could probably even redo it. So if I select all this stuff, you could, in SketchUp, you could create that surface. And you can see here that it did create that surface for me. So it's this object. This one came in a bit weird, so I think I have to do my selection slightly different. I think I have to select it this way. If I select it this way, I should have a better output there. So let me press that button again. No. Maybe I just don't select this piece. I think that might do it. Okay. So if I recreate that, yeah, there you go. That looks a bit better as a mesh. And again, I can map this mesh instead. So if I do that, I'll click on this. I'll set it as a topo and send it over. And as that's being sent, I'll see that new one kind of pop into here. So this one looks a bit better than the other one. Actually, I do want to undo that change so we could see them side by side. And I will reload it. Model. There you go. And then the reason why this kind of first version is important for us is that you can compound things together to make like this. Like if you have a few different pieces together that you want to define a topo, you can do that. So if I go at the parent level, basically, and if I go inside it, you can see that there's groups, and then there's just live geometry here. And so it could be either nested or not nested, which is also kind of a feature that we've added, especially for the DXF workflows for like that car. Like you no longer have to explode that car basically to be able to get it. So I'll do Control Z to go back to that in a second. But yeah, so if I map this one to a topography now, you'll see what happens. And again, this is kind of a weird thing, but I just mirrored it 4 times. But yeah, if I map that over, it's going to load up here. And then, yeah, there you go. So the topo lines look a bit weird because of that, but it's kind of just showcases kind of what's going on with it. So if I edit that, you can obviously see all the points that came through.
Yeah, for me, topography is always interesting anyways in Revit. When you're trying to model those points, it's somewhat unpredictable what you get sometimes and how it rationalizes those. But it's cool. It's coming over. So it supports topography. So what are all the categories that it supports right now? So you brought over topography. That's new.
Yeah. So we've gone through some of these, like the doors and the windows, the mesh workflows, direct shape versus DXF. The direct shape is pretty good for like pretty rectilinear things because they come in as it's easy to map those, not map them, but it's easy to kind of set textures to them and materials. Whereas the mesh is kind of a lot more forgiving and friendly with like anything that's happens to have like a curvilinear geometry. So I use that one actually mostly. And then, yeah, I think we've gone through most of these. Now for component based, we're going to get through like pipes next in the last demo, where it's the last example here, where you can select the line. Actually, you can see if you select the line, you get some other drop downs here. So, well, right now we have a pipe, but we can see how we could grow that into like beams, columns, that sort of thing. So one more thing I'll do here actually with this topography is obviously like before we even implemented Topo, you could also have it as a mesh-based thing if you don't want Revit to natively kind of create that. Obviously, you always have that fallback option. So I could just go mesh DXF here, and if I send that over, you'll see that this gets replaced by like a mesh basically. So it's exactly the one-to-one replica of what you saw in SketchUp. So yeah. Okay, so I'll go to I'll Control Z this because I could show that there was a question about the car here, so I can just undo to the maximum. Let's see, we still have the car? Yay, we do. Okay, so yeah, I can pull this up right now. Again, we don't support materials at the moment for our DXF workflows, but we could definitely we do, know about that we wanted to support that and be able to control them. Right now it's all one material. So if I go to my manager here or object styles, I go to my object styles, you'll see that car, and I might have too many things here right now at the moment, but each kind of DXF import, you could change the material from here basically right now. And again, in the next release, we're actually going to have these wrapped in a family, so you won't have to access them this way. And then again, this will be a simpler list here, or you won't have a list here. So that's one thing. But yeah, so if I boot up, let's see, if I boot up Enscape here for, again, this is the Revit side. It actually comes out, and you'll see, it actually comes out pretty decent in terms of the triangulation and the meshing. It seems like Enscape might have a built-in way to smooth the normals of these triangles and keep the kind of the harder ones. So it might have its own auto routine, which makes sense because if you look at their like line style, if you want to have like a hidden line mode, it does come in that way. So some of these other textures are a bit weird. So because I just use like basic, what comes out of the box. But yeah, so this is you can see how it's kind of softened, but then some edges are kind of hardened. So it does do that. But it is all one material right now, and I know this car pretty well because I drive it. So show all the buttons.
This is awesome. So this is your car, Ben, here that you've translated over, and you were showing the different layers in there. So that would be great, like if for the spinners that are on your wheels, right, or the undercarriage lights that you have going on. I'm sure you have some blackouts on the tail light. So I mean, you could put all those things to their own layers as part of that translation.
Right. Okay. You could animate the spinning, the spinners.
Yeah, can you animate the spinners here? Does Enscape it does some animations, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Look at this.
That's what I can run on SketchUp side too. I think I'm going to do that too real quick. But I just also wanted to just showcase, like, these are all groups basically. So it is parsing all the kind of recursively all the geometry inside that object. So if I run it here, let's see, hopefully things don't break. We'll see this back side to side. And with Helix, there are a few kind of common visualization workflows actually, where people want to use like Enscape on the SketchUp side and just want to bring in the Revit geometry so that it looks good in SketchUp, but then they embellish it in SketchUp. They add like, paper napkins on the tables and, all the other entourage that SketchUp has a pretty large library for that is a bit more difficult to get into. Now, obviously, Enscape offers its own library as well. But yeah, so yeah, I'll pull these over. So yeah, obviously, when you get the textures in and the materials, it's better, and even the building as well. But that's kind of something that we could definitely kind of continue to develop further. And ultimately, what we want is to actually have this one-to-one, even like materials for the visualization workflows, to have like the buildings copying textures over, the materiality from the DXF import, so that you don't have to distinguish them from one platform to the other, because of the same software. Enscape could actually, it's the same engine basically. It's just meshes and textures and settings. Cool. So that's that.
Very cool.
Okay, so I think there was. I should note you could. I'll probably just demonstrate it here real quick. We also have support for ceilings in this workflow, but it's only supported from Revit 2022 and up, actually. So you'll get a little warning here. So if I make it, let's say I make a, actually I could do it even by, no, I'll make a layer here real quick to just demonstrate that, how that works. I had another model that I was going to go over, but I'm going to skip that. So I'll just show it here. So I'll make a Helix ceiling.
And while you're doing that, Ben, that's because Autodesk exposed the Revit API for ceilings in 2022 and up, right? So that it's not exposed for versions below that.
Exactly.
Okay.
So what you'll get in the UI over here, if you choose a ceiling, you'll get this little warning that says ceilings not supported in Revit prior to 2022, in versions prior to 2022. So if you were to have Revit 2021 open, you won't see anything, basically. So if I send that over, I just kind of remap this as that kind of an object on this side. And this is, did I close Enscape? I think I did. Yeah, I did. Yeah. So basically now I can see that there's like a ceiling here, and I can change that to whatever ceiling system I'd want. So yeah, you can see that in there.
That's cool.
Cool.
Ben, I don't know if you're going to talk about this, but the last time we did a demo, you showed the sloped roofs and how easily you could change the roof from go from one to the other with the roof. I don't know if that's too hard to show, but
oh sure, yeah, I can try
for
it
anyone
here.
who missed it last time. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, and right now we have kind of like a V1 version of this where it's not that complex, like it doesn't handle complex geometries, but I think this is still classified as a roof. Let me see. This is a Helix roof it's on that layer. So let's see what happens here if I did that. Yeah, we got a roof and a ceiling. So let's see what happens. Yay, look at that.
Yeah,
so what it does is it figures out that angle basically, and it sets that slope for that element. So you go back in here parametrically and change that slope to something else if you wanted to, 30 degrees, let's say, and that will kind of do that sort of thing. One thing to note, actually, now that we're here too, is the way walls work too is that as you saw, like this roof is actually hosted to the previous level. So we do host our elements from the SketchUp side to the Revit side to the right level, so that if you manipulate your levels, things would change. Now these are kind of longer walls, so things won't kind of. But if I move like one of these levels below, I could also show that. Like it's going to affect a bunch of other elements that are hosted to that. As you can see, like some of this stuff is starting to move. Or if I move this level above, it's going to affect because of the hosting, the way they're hosted. It's, bimified, essentially.
That's awesome.
That's really important, right? So like making sure from a model authoring standpoint, your objects are hosted to the correct level. It's just like anything, it's garbage in, garbage out. So basically, I think the way you guys have designed it, Mark and Ben, is to be kind of this prescriptive workflow, but also try to set some guardrails for what maybe is industry understanding of best practice for modeling. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. We kind of have a whole post on our forums about like how intricate or how detailed do we want to get with like the hosting, like how, what's hosted to what. So if you guys were to go there and you want to chime in, you could definitely kind of like, I'll pull this up very briefly here. But like, let's see, I think we have like floor. Yeah, I think it's one of these like, so there's a few recent posts here that are actually really cool to read if you guys have time. But yeah, I'll probably find it, or maybe Bill, you might find that article that talks about kind of how hosting works.
Yeah, and,
cool.
and just to chime in on it a little bit, I mean, we have some basic rules that different elements follow to be able to host appropriately. Like Ben was just talking about the ceilings. So you have different criteria, like a ceiling shouldn't necessarily be hosted to like the level below or something, right? It should be hosted to in a specific way. And same thing with a lot of these things, like the walls and the windows and things, right? Like maybe it's the closest level below that it needs to be hosted to all the time. So we have a lot of that sort of industry best practice sort of codified. And then from there, we kind of started to develop some level interoperability workflows. So you could actually start to bring your Revit levels over into SketchUp so that you don't have to, there's like a level creator on the SketchUp side within Helix. If you want to, create
Yeah.
levels over there, but you could also just bring them over from Revit, and then there's some basic rules that those follow as well, so that things just stay linked up. And then, that you're also not, uh, ever deleting existing levels and things like that, making sure we're being very conscientious about the way that all the components are interacting with levels on the Revit side, so that people don't have any strange behavior, basically. But there's a lot that we could do on this,
Yeah.
a lot, and there's a lot of possibilities, especially from the programmatic perspective. So it's really a question of what exactly does your firm do, and then Helix is the platform that could basically codify those things as required.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's thanks for that.
Thanks, Mark.
I was gonna actually demonstrate that as you were saying. So basically, I just copied these levels over here, these new ones, and what I could do on the Revit side, I could export levels. So if I export those there, then that way I could see them in SketchUp. So I could go to my tools here, I could go to import levels, and you'll see that new levels were created as soon as I hit that. So I'll do it again. Import levels. These are the levels from Revit that were just imported just now, basically, that I didn't have before. So if you have a workflow where you kind of have your Revit model already set up with the levels too, you should bring those as well too. So you should map or select those levels and kind of get them over on the SketchUp side, so that if you're doing things in SketchUp, you could kind of use those for reference, those levels.
So anyone with a company Revit template, a lot of times those templates are, like you said, they're preloaded with their standard levels. So start there, import your levels into SketchUp, and then you begin your design.
Yeah. Now, as an alternate too, you could also make them. So if I wanted to make more levels on the SketchUp side, and actually that's how I did these first levels, because I knew where my top of floor is. So I could just kind of work off of my SketchUp model since I started with SketchUp. Then that also carries over too. So if I did this times 5, like I have a few levels here, I could send those over, and then they're part of like So see, that's gonna load up. It's kind of part of our operators. So then it just kind of they load in from SketchUp basically. So there's options basically that of levels, but like you're right, Mark. Like, there's a new feature where we kind of added so that you could actually bring them also from Revit straight into SketchUp as these kind of planes. So yeah, cool. I think I'll pivot to the plumbing pipes for now, unless anyone else has questions on this one.
Let's see plumbing. I want to see it.
All right, let's go for it. So put that down. Skipping over that model, and we're going straight to this one. So this is what it will look like, but there's some kind of work from. So there's two ways we could do it: SketchUp to Revit, and then we could also do it just within Revit with DWG links, so AutoCAD essentially. But right now we're kind of in an interim state, so like CRUD's not working. So I could also show a GIF of how it used to work, but again, this is pretty alpha, this piece. So just take that into account. So anyways, so I'll take this out. I will load up. Let me see. I do want to close out of my other ones. I don't need that. I don't need. Yeah. Okay. So that's good. And then if I come back here, load up Helix. Looks like I didn't remember this piece. 1 second. Okay. And then what I'll do is I'll clear up my mapping. We do actually have an idea to just have a clear all mapping button, or you could import a new one basically. But yeah, so if I start there, I've placed all these lines onto a pipe layer actually. So all these lines are placed on that layer, and I could just go in there and so if I look at that layer here, pipes, I could just make that on a pipe, and then I'll just use default right now. We don't have any. Again, it's pretty early on the SketchUp side, and if I send that to Revit, I could come back here. Let me go to the Evolve Lab and start to load that stuff in here. So there it is. So these are analytical, so or placeholder, I should say, actually pipes. So what we would do is, well, for this specific one, we do have to do some cleanup, but I'll show you the DWG one. That one we've kind of revamped a bit, so we don't have to do this anymore. And then if you select them, you can convert them to, convert them to so that they're physical. So if I do that, I do get some issues, but it's not too bad. I can still fix them. So if I select these, I'll convert these as well. There you go. And then I'll just trim these over so that they are good to go. Let's see. There you go. And again, we kind of have this a bit more automated on the other side. What's really cool is that it creates all these kind of additional kind of connectors and all that for that system, and it keeps it like all intact. So it's really cool. If you wanted to, and again, we are actually also updating this workflow as well. So I'll show you. But if you wanted to, you could also load this into SketchUp. So if I want to see that in SketchUp, I can import from Revit, and you can see those are coming through. The current limitation right now is that not everything is coming through, like all the connectors and stuff. But I think, Mark, like I think even in this sprint, you were working on something that actually is going to bring everything in, in a very nice way. So yeah, so this is kind of like the SketchUp kind of side of things. And then what we also have is kind of, if you link a DWG, we could also query it within Revit that way. So if I turn on this tool, I'll just pull this over here. And if I select my kind of DWG instance here, you can see that I already can actually have this. So I could map it to this is the layer that I want. So the way you could do that is you could query a CAD file. So if you query it, you could see that, and you could see what the layer you want. It's called PHWRR. And that button is also this button right here. I just have it hotkeyed. And then, yeah, so I selected that. I mapped it to my option here, and I made it a 3-inch pipe, and I could choose from this drop down. We just have a few preset pipes right now in sizes. Those are instance parameters also. So I'll just create pipes, and you'll see that. So let me actually see this. Okay. And you can kind of see it happening, but it's kind of loading. There you go. So I do have some errors. So it first kind of created like those a placeholder ones, so it was hard to see. But then it converts them into the kind of the physical ones. So if I click OK here, you can see all those pipes now got converted. So if I hide this category, you can see kind of like the substrate geometry that it worked with. So it does some cool things, like it automatically cleans up the lines, collinear checks. It does some automation. We developed this one kind of a bit for our services side, where we actually had to do this manually ourselves for some clash coordination, since that, one of the subcontractors were not using Revit. Obviously, ideally, you want everyone to use Revit, and that's the ideal. But, we don't live in an ideal world. So for us to kind of like handle that part, it's like, you know what, we have Helix. We could bake this in here, and it will really help us out. So we did it. Yeah, so if I copy this over, you can do the same thing. So you could bring this up, and actually I'll do it in elevation this way.
While Ben's doing that, any comment, Jim? I know you're kind of in the thick of maybe something similar to this right now.
Yeah, for sure. I'm like, yeah, super impressed with this feature. It's helping us out a lot on a project we're working on. And just the fact that it gets us most of the way there, and so if we have a 2D CAD drawing, we can run this process, run with this process, and it gets the pipes in there. So we're not just manually tracing pipes now like we were before. And then if we need to make any adjustments, like Ben, you mentioned, it will account for the valve symbols, right? It will just continue the pipe through the valve, but then we can just come in later and drop valves in there, and it just saves us a ton of time. So yeah, I was super impressed with this, and it's a very helpful tool.
Yeah, it's pretty fun to move these around, actually. You can only do so much, though. Can't but still, like, it's pretty cool that, they're all dignified and it works.
Yeah, and it does the T's and the elbows and everything, which is really impressive. So yeah, great work, guys.
Yeah, so we could map other things too, like let's say these arrows, if you wanted to. This is the anno mark. Let's see what happens if I do that. We're gonna break it. Where is it? Tag mark, this one. Standard, and we'll make it 1 inch. Sure. Let's see what happens. That's gonna be fun. So all our arrows will become pipes from now on. Oh, even the arrows themselves, like the little pieces.
Oh my goodness, look at this.
Did it outline the arrow? Is that just a really?
It's not done yet, so we'll see what happens.
Okay, it's still working.
Okay, let's see.
Anything on
it's
that
still
later.
doing it. It's still busy.
Yeah.
I think even the outline of the actual arrowhead, I think, is part of the. It's like 3 pipes. Yeah. I wonder how it resolved that connection over there at the tip.
Yeah, that angle
Probably
is going to be
We'll
a tough
see.
one. That's going to be a tough angle.
This is
Yeah.
if your team takes it very literal to convert the CAD file to Revit. This is an example of that. So
Yeah.
we are 1 o'clock Central, 2 o'clock Eastern, though we are at time. So I want to try, if it's okay. Maybe we'll jump into the last piece, which is that we do have a special promo code for the next few weeks as part of the launch. And so if anyone is interested in Helix, if you go to the website and you put in the promo code Helix launch, all caps, you get a 15% discount on it as we want to celebrate this milestone and giving back to the community. So that was something that we wanted to point out. And so if anyone is ever is interested in trying it, you can do a trial of it. If you want to pull the trigger on it, you can get a special discount on it, 15% off for the next few weeks. So just wanted to throw that out there as well. So
yeah, I'm
cool.
going to pull this up real quick. I wanted to check back on the Revit side too to see if this we'll probably post a screenshot if this doesn't finish by the time we wrap up our call. But yeah. So if you go to our site, like Bill was saying, you could kind of access these links here, and you could, you'd kind of either create an account or something like that, and then you could purchase it. And again, at the portal, you could essentially kind of add that. Actually, I could go through that real quick. So.
And if you're spending, it's $29 a month right now, right? Is the price for it. So if you're spending more than a billable rate of $29 per month, there's your ROI for it.
Yep. So you could, add promo code right here and say, Helix on. There you go. So if I apply that, you would get that 50% off.
Ooh, I like that little animation. That's cool.
Yeah, it's got a little thing there.
Very cool. Sweet. Yeah. And that just helps us guys to continue supporting the tool, supporting the other R&D efforts we're working on. We have other tools we're working on. So every little bit helps, just to kind of further that mission of leaving the world better than we came into it, providing cool tools and value to the industry. So we appreciate you guys and all the contributions. Shout out to Mark and Greg on our team, Chris, Ben, Daniel, everyone that's contributed to the Helix tool. We really appreciate everyone and appreciate the community. Ben, thanks for doing another demo on this. This has been great.
For sure.
With that, though, because we are at time, we want to be sensitive to that. And we just want to thank everyone for watching today. If you guys are on the YouTube side, you can you can subscribe. That way you get notified of future content like that we have. We have the Helix forum. If you want to add any conversations on that side. But thank you so much, Ben, for walking us through the new release of Helix. We really appreciate it, man.
Yep, for sure. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Cool. All right. Take care, guys.